Dear tea friends from around the world, welcome to a new tea class with me, Stéphane Erler, from the Tea Masters blog and the tea-masters.com boutique. And today we are going to do a tea class about Heicha, because today is the 20th year of the production of this Xiaguan Jingguatuo cha here. And so I thought let's focus a bit on this tea, and this is a bit the opportunity to talk about Heicha in general. It's a tea class I usually don't drink and talk about so much, but the other day, actually the other night, I had really a very pleasant tea session with this tea, with candlelight, and it was really very cold, and it was quite late. I did not want to have a tea that would prevent me from sleeping, and this tea was really the perfect match for this occasion. Really very pleasant, very sweet, and I thought it's worthwhile to do a video about it, and also about Heicha in general. Now, Heicha is like the last family in the 6 families of teas. We have white, yellow and green in the least oxidized. Then partially oxidized we have oolong. Then fully oxidized we have red teas, Hongcha, sometimes called black tea in the West. And but I prefer to use red tea because Heicha is black tea, dark teas in Chinese. And these Heicha, in China you have several regions making Heicha. Now you have Guangxi that is doing Liubao, you have Luo'an from Anhui, and you also have Heicha from Hunan, and also from Sichuan. Now for Sichuan I have such an example. Now this is kind of a brick Tangjuan from Hunan. Try to show you a bit what it looks like. It started to be drunk. It's already 30 years old at least. Now, if poor tea is graded from from a level of 1 to 10, then the leaves in this for this tea, for this Sichuan Heicha, they are probably about 30 or 40. If 0 to 1 is the smallest, the buds, 10 is the biggest leaf in the most mature leaves in Yunnan, while then this Sichuan, the leaves, they are so thick, they are so old, only lots of Huangpian yellow leaves. It's much more like 30 or 40. Really, the leaf quality is really quite astonishingly bad. to say like this. Oh, hello Valérie from Paris, and Elizabeth from Montreal. Thank you for my very dear and dear friends who are really missing a class. Welcome to our class. These to give you another example that Heicha really is much more than just pu'er. Pu'er is one Heicha in the family, but there are lots of different Heicha, like this Sichuan brick. And let's now dispel the myth that there is about show pu'er. This is a show pu'er from Xiaguan. Now, show pu'er, also cooked pu'er, or manually fermented puer was not invented in 1973 in the Mongrel tea factory. It was a process that was applied, as we can see already, in other regions of China, like in Sichuan or Hunan or Guangxi. So it's not an invention from Mongrel. Maybe Mongrel at that time in 1973, that was the first time that they did it again. It was something that had been lost and then it had been reintroduced, but it was not something new. Now, in this book, Affection for Appreciation and Collection, The Forgotten Stories of Purple Clay, there is another proof that the fermentation process existed long before 1973, and I propose to read a few excerpts from the story of one such case. Now, this is an interview with Lo Chufun. Mr. Lo Chufun is a Hong Kong tea merchant who passed away sadly last year, but it's good that we have this book that has kept his memories. So Lo Chufun was born in 1927 in Guangdong, and he started to work in the tea business already when he was 12 years old, and when he was 19, he came up with the idea of processing oolong tea into black tea, because the black tea was very flourishing at that time. Now here, black tea was actually Hongcha, but seeing that the black tea from Hunan was priced 3 times higher than the oolong tea, the expected profit would be huge if his process was proven workable. Now, also, Lo had already learned the techniques of roasting, sieving, and steeving various kinds of old teas, and spent his entire 2 months' earnings to buy a wide range of edible essences, such as rose and rosemary as additives. The finished products could only carry the similar reddish-brown color, while failing to emanate the delicate fragrance. He reviewed and tested the processing steps over and over again. He finally found a way to ferment the leaves manually after many sleepless nights. First, splash water to the tea leaves at a proportion of 1:5. Next, wrap the damped leaves in craft paper bags for fermentation to 70 degrees Celsius, 75 degrees Celsius. Then unwrap the fermented leaves and toss them at a controlled temperature for oxidation till reaching a dryness of 70%, and rest the oxidized leaves in storage for 60 days. The tea color of the leaves processed in this way was more brownish, but with a lighter taste than that of steamed old tea. This is the first appearance of today's dark puer, also known as ripe puer, of which the time for natural oxidation and unconventional method was largely shortened. Okay, so he did this when he was 19. He was born in 1927. That means he did this fermentation in 1946, so much earlier than 1973. Hi Terry. So this is one instance that shows that chaud puer is ripe puer is something that is much older, and that it did not start in the CNNP era. We already had good hints because the Reicha family is much larger than puer, and this process already was applied in Hunan or in Sichuan, like for this brick. And here, by reading this passage, you also have the process, how it's done. So actually, the main thing to make the tea ferment, to make the leaves ferment, it's the addition of water to the leaves, and then it's a bit more like a composting. You cover the leaves that have water, and the leaves organically they start to ferment, and this is what turns them dark, very dark, hence the name. And it will also break down some molecules and make the taste smoother. It's like when you instead of eating your salad raw, if you stir fry it very quickly, the salad will be much more easier to digest. And that's why most greens in Taiwan or in China are quickly stir fried and steamed as side dishes, and they're therefore much easier to digest and to eat than cold salads that are left raw. Now, okay, so I think we have done a good overview of Reicha, which is actually fermented tea, not to confuse with oxidized tea. Oxidation process is what you do to get your red tea, like what is the most famous is Darjeeling. It started actually with Lapsang Souchong, and in Taiwan we have Hongyu, Hongyun, or my Dai Oolong bread from the East Coast, and these are oxidized teas. This is a different family, it's fermented. Now in the story, he tried to, it's a bit a mix of both. They mentioned fermentation and oxidation, because to do the fermentation with the leaves, you can also first oxidize them. Okay, let me show you the whole Jinghua. It's quite a beautiful shape. Really like a melon shape, and we nicely see the 6 quarters. It's even still possible to see the marks of the fabric that when it was pressed, very nice marks. We can see lots of lighter colored leaves. These are the buds, they have a lighter color. And when we smell, the smell is not so strong as one would expect from a pu'er, from a show pu'er. Remember, 2 smells, one short and one long. It has some nice earth smells, heavier smells. The smells I dislike the most are the light, dried grass. When it's just dried grass, usually it's, in my experience, it's not such a good sign for the tea. Okay, let's put it here. I propose that we start drinking it, and to be very objective and neutral, I'm going to use a Gaiwan, but I'm trying to make it nice. I won't push it too far. Like I would test it, since it's a tea that I know quite well. Now, first, before we drink it, we have to unflake the leaves. Now, this is a very important step of brewing a compressed tea, is to flake it well, and you can see that the tea is coming off nicely, but yet I still feel a firmness. A tea that is too flaky like this one actually means the leaves are don't contain so much flavor. So it's a good balance of hardness and coming off easily after 20 years of age. If it's not coming off, we can give a bit more strength, and it comes off yeah, quite easy. Well, that's enough already. And then what we can continue to do is with maybe one hand continue to break down the leaves, not actually breaking them down, but to separate them from each other. We don't. The best really is to have each leaf separately. So I don't use too much strength, just enough to get them to open up. I imagine people who are nervous, they can do this. Okay, let's start the brew, preheating my guy 1 first. Oh, today we have somebody from Ecuador. That's very nice. Welcome to you, Candy. Okay, I'm checking if the lid is warm, yes. And I'm pouring. Now again, just the bottom is enough. Depends always how strong you like it, and then this will also depend how strong you will brew it, how long you brew it. Now, Recha, we see that puer is in the family of Recha because they will all ferment. So even though we will also differentiate between Sheng and Shou puer, the reason why the Chinese still put the Sheng puer within Recha and not in a different category like Oolong, they could have almost, because if you look at the leaves, they are a bit partially oxidized. But they considered that Sheng puer is going to age and ferment with time naturally, and therefore it also belongs in this fermented teas category. But however, of course, there is a very large and very big difference in character between a Sheng and a Shou puer. Now today we are having a Shou puer, where the manual fermentation is a way to accelerate kind of the aging, and it creates smells that are more similar to what you have when your puer is very aged. Now this, and also especially the color is what is the most similar in the beginning, but the smell actually, it's not right away that they are so similar. I would say even a Shou puer will gain from with time. Now, in the an interesting thing in the story that we read is we see that this fermentation process was a way for the merchant to change a bit the character of the tea. So, there's a lot of demand for fermented teas from Hunan, so he wants to make something similar. So, it's a way a bit to to change the tea. It's like at the beginning, green tea is really the way to get the leaves and the taste very close to its original state, to its original character. With Sho Pu'er, you really try to transform it to the max. And sometimes for good reasons, but sometimes simply to make something drinkable that at first was not so drinkable. There is a lot of commercial thinking that goes into the making of Sho Pu'er. One reason that Sho Pu'er is a bit more difficult tea for tea connoisseurs is that in many cases the Sho Pu'er is made with lower quality leaves, and then the tea is also of a lower quality. Now, one way to spot Sho Pu'er that is not of such a high quality is when the brewer throws away the first brew, maybe the first two brews, because it's very harsh. Now here, even the first brew, what many would consider the rinse, is very pleasant to drink actually. So it's a bit a challenge for a selector to find a good white pu'er. Maybe for other tea categories like oolong, lots of good oolongs are made all the time in Taiwan. But for Sho Pu'er, I find it a much bigger challenge to find one that is really high enough in quality to deserve to be selected. So yeah, in my selection I only have two. I have this one and an even older one from Mongrel Factory, also a Jingguo. But probably it's because this process has traditionally been more used for cheaper teas, for lower quality leaves like fall leaves, just to make them drinkable enough. That's why in most cases there's not such a big supply of high quality white pu'er, but it exists. Really, this is one of the proof, and I would also say it's a kind of a benchmark. If you want to know what is a good white pu'er, you can try this one. Really, the basic thing to make a good white pu'er are two things: good leaves and good water. Why? Because we saw that the fermentation process requires 1 to 5, a ratio of water from 1 to 5, and so if the water is tainted or bad or has funny smells, they will transfer to the tea. Therefore, the quality of the water to do the fermentation process is really very important. That's only with good water that you can have such a pure taste. Okay, so since I have a bit of a running nose, I'll continue to drink. And I'll enjoy the dark, almost regis smell here. You can see I did not use so many leaves. It's maybe 1/4 of the volume of the Gaiwan. That's why the brew was not so dark, even though it's ripe pour. I expect the second brew to be a bit darker now that the leaves will release more of their flavors. In terms of pouring, we can actually pour also a bit stronger if you really want. But I like my tea to be very smooth, so I'm even with the chaud pour, I'm pouring quite slow to make it even more mellow, more smooth, and also to feel this nice feeling of calm when you do all your movements very slowly. This is the additional benefit of chashi. Well, it's about relaxation. Here the Gaiwan's lid has just moved. The tea has released some of the water that was poured on it, and it means it's ready to be served. Let me show you the beautiful color. And so I'm using a porcelain Gaiwan. This means there's no rounding of the tea, but it's completely sweet, no harshness. Nice deep flavors of that are earthy, that remind me both of a forest in the fall, wood, but also a bit of the taste of snow. Interesting. Yeah, really very nice. A bit more. Now this maker of fermented tea in Hong Kong, Lo Chu Fun, he was working at the Fuqua Tea Company, and in the early 70s, this person is also famous for making Songpin tea. Let me show you. This is pu'er, actually sheng pu'er, not a show, and but it was made in and pressed for in Hong Kong by this Lu Tufun with a nice cha in the middle. Songpin. I'm glad to have this one. Now, I mentioned a bit aging about rye pu'er. Now, the reason most collectors prefer to use to purchase sheng pu'er is because sheng pu'er has much larger change when it ages. When it goes from young sheng to old sheng, it's really two completely different teas. Whereas for rye pu'er, if you had this tea now 20 years ago and now, the change is much more subtle. What will change is, of course, in terms of smoothness, it will become smoother with time. It will become more and more refined, but the aromas, they will pretty much stay similar. The color will stay the same, very dark. The cha chi is, of course, when it's just made, maybe a little bit unsettled, but much lower in intensity than sheng pu'er. That's why shu pu'er is a tea that is much more easier to drink. It won't make you restless, sleepless at night. Especially the good ones. But therefore, since it's not very strong when it was made, it won't become stronger with time. Actually, it will continue to go down slightly. So shu pu'er are much more stable, and if you find a good one, actually you can store it very easily. It won't change so much, unless, of course, you put it in a place that is not clean, that has funny smells. That's also a reason why many pu'ers have sometimes have not such good smells, just because of their storage, because they are cheap teas that are made in very big quantities, and then if you have lots of tea, you also need a very large warehouse to store them. And I've seen even warehouses in Taiwan with pu'er stored by the tons, and of course, then these very large warehouses are not always the cleanest places, and that's very often where tea can pick up bad smells. So it's always better to store your tea yourself, because then you know how you store it, and you will usually pay much better attention, and you will use much more care for your tea than a merchant who is not going to drink it, since he's just there to sell it. Okay, let's continue. But my experience now, by also comparing these shu pu'er with very old sheng from the 50s, 60s and 70s, is that there are some similarities. Now, not just the color and the taste, but if you have a really very old, nice show puer and a very old sheng puer, there are some commonalities, and I can see how it's actually very easy to pretend that one is the other. Of course, an aged sheng has more energy, has a freshness that is a bit lacking in these show puer, but the experience actually is also very nice. Especially when you consider the price of aged sheng nowadays, sometimes you really feel, oh, actually these show puers are quite a bargain. Yeah, so I'm still on my iPad. If you have some questions, feel free to shoot them. I hope that you are enjoying this tea. I wanted to show you also the latest postcards that are ready now for this year. The one that, yes, the two that you chose, plus the one that I added because I felt we needed some light, something more joyous for this year. Okay, now I've brewed it a bit longer than the first two brews. Actually, it also reminds me a bit of the smell in a ceramic workshop, like in La Borne. There are many ceramic workshops where they have wood kilns to fire the ceramics, and these smells of puer are very. They ring a bell. They echo the smell of the clay, which come from the earth, and the wood, and this brings me to another point, that if we were not using porcelain gaiwan to test a bit this tea, I would actually recommend a clay gaiwan, and not necessarily an Yixing gaiwan, an Yixing teapot. Actually, it could also be any other more porous teapot, clay teapot, because the porosity of the clay will help to make the a bit rougher aromas of puer more mellow. I see there's a question, please, or there's another comment, let me see. Valerie asks, show puer are sometimes difficult to appreciate for beginners. Does it take time, or is it just a question of preference? Well, as I mentioned, also another reason, not just time or preference, but also it's in my experience, more difficult to find a high quality or good quality chaud pu'er than a good quality green or oolong or wet tea, because by nature almost a lot of makers of ripe pu'er, they use this process because their leaves are not of such a high quality and not so good, and they know, oh, these leaves, if I turn them into sheng pu'er, the tea won't be drinkable, and therefore I'm using the fermentation process so that I'm able to sell these leaves. So for this very first reason, I feel already that chaud pu'er are generally of a lower quality than sheng pu'er. Also, then in terms of preference, many beginners, they prefer green teas, Japanese greens, also high mountain oolongs, teas that are more light in terms of fragrances and taste, and this is really a very opposite kind of tea, and therefore it's also more difficult to appreciate if you started to appreciate green teas or lighter teas in general. This is really as heavy in aromas as it gets. So it's not really a tea that is a good companion to replace green tea, but it can be a good pairing when it's cold. In Hong Kong, they really like to have this tea during at the end of a meal. A little bit kind of a taste bud cleaner. Old Recha Hefchi, what a mystery. Where does it come from? Let me also give you a few more details about this Sichuan brick. I received it from a wholesaler as a gift, because at that time the market for aged pu'er was very hot, but the prices were so high that the merchants and the sellers, they were trying to find something that is similar to aged pu'er, but that is cheaper, and this one was at the time much cheaper, so I tried it a couple of times, but really it's literally not my cup of tea. Much too harsh in terms of taste. Really, you need a very porous tea clay to make it smooth enough to be drinkable. So if you have a nice chaud pu'er from Yunnan, the Recha from Sichuan is really not necessary. Okay, Elizabeth says, I tried this tea today and felt there was a scent and taste of bread, fresh from the oven. So smooth. Yeah? Yeah, thank you for sharing this impression. It's yeah, you can have a little bit this sweetness when you chew on your bread for a long time. A chemical reaction will happen in your mouth, and it will have a little bit this light sweetness. Valerie says, exactly, I'm on the opposite. I wonder about chaud pu'er. I keep on trying. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, it's really very drinkable, very easy to drink. This is something that is also very pleasant in the evening, and it's also very easy to brew since it has a very smooth taste. If you overbrew it, it won't usually become too harsh. Of course, you never want to concentrate the aromas too much, but let's say even you forgot about it for a few minutes, it will still be very drinkable, unlike a green tea or an oolong that will become too bitter if it's not such a high quality tea. But this one should not become too bitter, I would say. Okay, I'm even going to make a fourth time. This time I think I can start to really use a stronger pour. Let me show you that I'm also sometimes making a tea with a stronger pour, and I'm not always very slow, since you always see me brew in the beginning and never at the end. Maybe you get the wrong impression that I'm always very careful, or actually I'm always careful, but that I'm always very slow in my brew and never strong. But now that I've brewed it for 3-4 times, I feel that these leaves, they need a bit a stronger push. But important, always get your water to a boiling level. This is the best way to get all the aromas out of these leaves. And we saw that these leaves are high quality and are not getting bitter, so it's really possible to use a maximum temperature for this tea. Still, I look where the leaves are the most concentrated, where there are the more, and that's where I'm going to pour. Elizabeth says she has much lighter brews in terms of color or in terms of brewing length. But I know that you brew usually with a smaller teapot. But we saw that here I did not have such a dark color for my brews. When I used my Yixing teapot, I had a bit more concentration, darker brew the other day. Okay, I hope I did not forget anything. I hope you enjoyed this lesson today. Let me give you some tea. Allez, cheers, and see you next week for another lesson. And a little announcement, now I'm also present on the Telegram network. If you want to join me there, if you are already there, you can follow my channel there. Otherwise, I'm still on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course my blog. Now it's going to be the 17th year since I'm blogging about tea, and I'm really glad I started to do this 17 years ago, because it enabled me to have you as my tea friends and tea students today. So again, wish you a very nice weekend, and see you next week. Bye bye.